Years after the fabled cancellation and Taylor Swift is over party, Taylor Swift has soared to new heights as her star power and her position in our public imagination has only grown stronger over the years. It's hard to conceptualize just how big Taylor Swift really is. Increasingly, it seems like our idea of her has become more and more abstracted. Is she a person or a screen onto which we project our innermost thoughts and feelings? It's hard to tell based on the parasocial relationships she has cultivated intensely with the public throughout the years. What's different about this era of her career is that now she doesn't have to do the kind of legwork that she once did to convince her fans that she loved each and every one of them. Gone are the days of the 13-hour meet and greets and the secret sessions and the backstage passes. All she has to do now to solidify your undying love for her is give you a simple wave and say that she can see you all the way in the back of the nosebleeds at the Eras tour. Speaking of this tour, it's expected to be the highest grossing tour of all time, generating $1 billion and putting the woman herself into billionaire territory. Songs that are almost 5 years old and were never released as singles are charting in the top 20 of the Billboard Hot 100. Rolling Stone has called this phenomenon TAYLOR MANIA, which instantly recalls the Beatlemania of the 1960s, which the media used as a term to coin and describe the complete and total British invasion of the Beatles in the United States. Their fans' fervency was likened to a near religious worship of these young men, and some, even believed that they had mystical, supernatural healing powers. Boy bands have come and gone ever since the Beatles' reign of excellence, but none have really captured that sort of chokehold that they once had after they conquered the globe when they debuted on the Ed Sullivan Show in the United States. The closest comparable pop phenomenon is what's happening with Taylor Swift right now. Suddenly, the casual fan is a stan. The erosion between a regular listener and a diehard Swiftie is a peculiar and unique happening that has only seemed to really have taken place in the Midnights and Eras tour era. What is it about Taylor Swift that inspires this complete and total devotion? And how is she getting people so casually hooked into her iconography? Sure, Miley's having a bit of a moment right now, Doja Cat has been killing it, Olivia Rodrigo is very popular, but none of them are withstanding monsters on the hill like Taylor Swift. What's so peculiar about her is how she has maintained and increased her relevancy nearly 20 years into her career. It's hard to find a contemporary example of someone who has lasted with this kind of relevancy for just as long. One might say Madonna, but Madonna early on moved to being an adult contemporary artist. The unique and interesting thing about Taylor Swift is that she's still courting the young people, Gen Z and Gen Alpha and even below. That's what makes her endure, these new generations of fans that engage with her work without the context of what really happened before they arrived. There are so many reasons for how this came to pass, and I think I'd call it a perfect storm. It's a mix of luck, timing, and demand, and I think currently Taylor's career is surpassing even her wildest expectations, and the world is truly and scarily her oyster for whatever is going to come next. I think a real existential crisis prompted this shift, and in this video I'm going to trace what I think is a new and meteoric rise of a completely different era of Taylor Swift's power from where I think it all started to fall apart. Love her. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Zach. I am the Swiftologist. I make thoughtful weekly videos, and I have to welcome you to 1989 month. It is so close to the release date of 1989 Taylor's version, and I'm going to be spoiling all of you with career retrospectives and specifically touching on the main and key elements of that era of Taylor Swift's life. And I think that power, influence, and legacy are huge aspects of that era that I can't wait to unpack with you throughout this month. I'm going to be talking about her beef with Katy Perry. I'm going to be giving you a complete history of 1989, everything you need to know about it before the record comes out, and of course you will be getting my reaction. So I hope that you will subscribe and stay with me on this journey. I also have a lot of really exciting content coming for you on my podcast, Evolution of a Snake, and I am actually uploading all of my Twitch streams. I'm the Twitchologist as well, if you didn't know. I stream every Tuesday from 9 to 11 a.m. EST, and on Friday night from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. EST, and I am not able to upload those videos on YouTube because of copyright. I recently just watched the 1989 tour all the way through from start to finish, but I will be putting all of my Taylor Swift related streams onto the Patreon, so for as little as $3 you can go and check that out and have access to some of the best, gated, paywalled, interesting, juicy Taylor Swift content. And make sure to follow me on Twitch so that you get a notification the next time I go live if you don't want to sign up for the Patreon. Without further ado, let's get into one of my favorite topics, the Lover era, which was a mess. The Lover era was a hot mess. You all know this about me. I've said this before. In the Miss Americana documentary, which I kind of look at as, the thesis statement for that era, the vibe check of her mentality when she was done with Reputation and really trying to move on and cleanse her name in the public opinion, trying to move away from this sort of like vengeful, vindictive persona that she had crafted for herself. In Miss Americana, Taylor talks at length about how she was ready to kind of age out of gracefully being a pop star. It seemed that she really felt in this moment that her position at the center of the pop world was coming and going very quickly. She mentioned wanting to go quietly and not make people sick of her, musing about writing for other artists, etc., etc. I think this is interesting because she talked about scaling down her touring commitments as well, and this was very much prompted in hindsight, I believe, by a fiercely private relationship that had saved her during the Reputation era. But I think also it was kind of a resignation. She thought that because of her age, she had aged out of being able to have the success that she had once had in her career. And so instead of trying to fight it, she wanted to try and come to terms with it. And thank God she didn't fully, because who knows where we would be if she had really, leaned into the I'm going to disappear for a while. But the album that she constructed amidst all of this inner turmoil and self-doubt was, in my opinion, an overproduced, forced attempt at manufacturing a moment. I do talk a lot more about the Lover album in depth in my Miss Americana documentary review, Journalist Reacts to video, so go and check that out if you're interested. I will touch on it a little bit briefly now, though. A moment can only be manufactured when the work is authentic and true. We've seen this time and time again. For example, the impact that the Folk Levermore era had upon Taylor's career is far more significant than what she did with Lover, and she certainly poured a lot more effort into trying to make Lover happen, as opposed to Folklore and Evermore, where she just, surprise dropped them and kind of let them take a life of their own. In the Miss Americana documentary, we see her going into the studio to make a hit, which is such a strange way for her to create, because she's never created like that before. She had just switched labels after, a pretty contested battle for ownership of her master recordings, and she was probably under pressure to manufacture a hit straight away to justify the newly favorable terms of her contract, hence the relentless promo strategy we saw for this record. But what was the strategy? There was none. Kids Bop singles, a very messy album rollout, hideous merch. The record ended up getting tepidly positive reviews from critics who had just kind of started being nice to her again after feeling bad about the relentless pummeling they gave her during Reputation, which has had a critical resurgence, thank God, in hindsight, and is a far superior album to Lover. During this time, Taylor had also been vindicated by the full release of the conversation between her and Kanye West on the phone, and she probably gave what was her last tell-all interview to Rolling Stone. And the rollout for this record just felt very forced to me. In the Miss Americana documentary, you can see her kind of talking to herself before she goes on stage saying, "Don't get dead-eyed." It felt like it was a lot of answering to what people had demanded of her. Be political, but also be fun. Let go of the vendettas. Don't be dark. Don't dwell. Talk about your fun relationship. Get back to writing about love. She planned Loverfest, which was 4 shows in the US and a couple of festivals and a Glastonbury headline. It kind of seemed like this was her victory lap as she was winding down. There are also really no enduring hits from this era except for Cruel Summer, which is only a hit because of the TAYLOR Mania that I'm talking about in this video. And this all leads me into where everything fell apart and came back together again, the Great Reset, because the best thing that ever happened to Taylor Swift was the pandemic. When it seemed like the world had shut down and life as we knew it was over, it was like she managed to finally catch her breath and breathe a sigh of relief. She could tap out of the pop star rat race that had been plaguing her mind for so long. There were no morning shows to go on, no award shows to stunt at. It was truly about being online and doing nothing. Many of us were going stir crazy at this moment, feeling so alienated and disconnected from ourselves and each other and the world around us, but we were also all more introspective than ever. And it was like we were kind of collectively having a vibe check or a reckoning. There was a lot of social justice movements, there was turmoil, there was frustration, and the reality of the real world was just so bleak. We really needed an escape. Dua Lipa actually kind of gave us a bit of an escape in her Dance Floor Spectacular Future Nostalgia, but that record was created before the pandemic and kind of indirectly benefited from being released in a pandemic as a way to, really project and pretend that you were on the dance floor. I would say that Taylor's Pandemic album was truly the first record or creative musical project that was born out of this isolation. It came so soon into the lockdown and the restrictions and the time when we had to really be kept away from each other. She created this album in secret, and she brought a new collaborator seriously into the fold of her repertoire in a way that she hasn't done in a long time, the National's Aaron Dessner. Many of us were turning to moodier and alternative music, which didn't really seem synonymous with Taylor Swift at the time, given that she'd just done Lover, which was a Kids Bop album. We had turned to this moodier, more alternative music while chilling at home and really sifting through our feelings. Taylor, being the smart businesswoman that she is, and also the kind of responsive character in pop culture, recognized this need, but she also recognized our need to dream and make stuff up and be carried away. What she really understood intuitively was that we all needed immersion. So she creates this record about getting lost in your fantasies, basically in secret, with a very tight circle of collaborators, Aaron Dessner, Jack Antonoff, Bon Iver, and the sound engineering team that worked with her. And she she effectively creates this process with almost no notice and doesn't even tell her label that she's doing it. It was an extremely organic, fast, and intuitive writing process. I don't think she's ever written in this way before, and the result was her first folk pop alternative record, Folklore. She did the least Taylor Swift thing that she could ever possibly do and surprise dropped the record. I can't stress to you, if you weren't around in the fandom pre-Folklore, how unusual this was for her. Taylor is a calculator and a storyteller. She likes to tease things and lay things up to really maximize her press coverage and the impact of her records. So she took a real gamble here and just randomly put up an Instagram post 12 hours before its release, letting us know there would be a brand new album in a matter of hours. This was surprising to everyone. I mean, it was like a punch in the face for me as a longtime fan. I had no time to prepare myself, and the result is my Folklore reaction, my very first video on YouTube. There was no better time for her to do something like this than in the pandemic, when the whole world was glued to their phones and bored with nothing to do. In her announcement post, she wrote, "Before this year, I probably would have overthought when to release this music at the perfect time. But the times we're living in keep reminding me that nothing is guaranteed. My gut is telling me that if you make something you love, you should just put it out into the world. That's the side of uncertainty that I can get on board with." This was the beginning of Taylor's incredible and non-stop manifesting generator era. She is just churning and creating and posting and publishing in real time. And I can't stress to you again, she has never been like that before. This is a disposition that only could have come to her during the pandemic, where the traditional realities of the music industry and publishing fell apart, and we had no clear idea if the world was ever even going to be the same again. And she had to really reassess how she was interacting with her creative process. What was the purpose of writing and creating art? Was it to become more famous? Was it to sell records? Or was it to be in touch with and in tune with her intuition? And I think she leaned into that latter understanding of how to create art. So Folklore comes out, and it is a smash for several reasons, critically and commercially. From the fan perspective, we were doing a lot of projecting, inserting ourselves into other people's stories to feel connected to and maintain some normalcy with each other. And this album has a lot of negative space on it. The vocal delivery is very relaxed. The production is sparse and muted. It's all about the storytelling, which is Taylor's best and most beloved skill anyway, by the industry and by the fans. She had kind of gotten away from that with all of the stunts and the moments of 1989, Reputation, and Lover. Some people genuinely forgot that this girl could really write a song and make you feel something. So in the midst of this main character syndrome era that we're all having, songs like August, where you could just insert yourself into this dreamy narrative and run away and escape from this cruel summer into this beautiful, nostalgic, whimsy, non-specific but very emotive, romantic period of time, was a brilliant idea. And the way that she positioned this album in marketing it as a fictional creation really allowed her to be more experimental and to push the boundaries and limits of her artistry, to write about subjects that maybe she wouldn't have if she knew that the record was going to be so clearly perceived as autobiographical and picked apart the way that her past records have been. She didn't have to contend with just writing about boys anymore. She could free herself of that constraint and run wild with her skill, and that she certainly did. And critics loved this record because it combined her best skill with some indie credibility. Collaborations are a very specific and unique way to expand your horizons, and Bon Iver and Aaron Dessner were a very specific vote of confidence for her, and this showed again to people that maybe weren't bowled over by Taylor Swift, the pop star, that she is in fact a serious artist and a force to be reckoned with. And this project was so successful that she followed it up at the end of the year with a sister album, Evermore, which was also adored for exactly the same reasons. Basically, we were so back. Few artists had this kind of leverage, budget, and existing fan base to pull off two successive surprise releases like that. This was really the start of TAYLOR Mania, I think. Folk Evermore reunited her with the casual listener. Also, it brought on a host of new fans who were interested in mining for Easter eggs, looking for clues, and understanding the song triangles, really delving into her artistry in a way that felt really interactive. It wasn't just like she would release an album and you would listen to it and have fun. It felt like an ongoing dialogue once it came out and all of this user-generated content started appearing about the songs and their connections and the meaning and the imagery. Another really essential part of how TAYLOR Mania has come to take over the world is the re-recordings. So most artists, when an era is done, rarely get to have a retrospective until the anniversary of an album comes up or they're way past their prime. So Taylor's re-recordings process really gave her this rare and unique opportunity to onboard the newer fans she had picked up during the Folk Evermore era and introduce them to the legend and the lore behind her prior works, really getting them to be involved and immersed in a way that they probably wouldn't been had these albums not been represented to them as new material. Since she's been so focused on developing parasocial relationships from the beginning, human psychology is very simple. People love being part of the in the know group, and there's so much Taylor lore to know and to mine. I mean, I've kind of made a whole career out of it. Plus, she gets a whole bunch of user-generated content out of this. Older fans cluing newer fans in, squabbling over the details, looking for Easter eggs. It's an evergreen content machine, and it's important to think of it like like that when we're discussing Taylor Mania. We're thinking about the ways in which Taylor has been able to cut above the noise and create a monoculture after it seemed to completely fall apart. It's very smart. It means that whenever Taylor releases a project, all she has to do is drop it and leave breadcrumbs, and we really do the rest for her. This drastically reduces her need and her reliance on mainstream media. Why would anyone care about her cloning her old records? In theory, it's not a very exciting process to hear like new, exactly the same re-recorded versions of songs you already know and love. Well, she came up with a genius value add to each of these projects, the vault songs. This was a way to make the older fans feel compelled to stream the new records, more of what you know and love, specifically from the old Taylor that we had become so disconnected from, while supporting Taylor on her venture to reclaim her masters. So this project got a lot of attention from the fans, but also from the industry, because she was truly doing something new, taking on one of the biggest names in music, Scooter Braun. Should we say a little prayer? Dear Lord, we pray that Scooter Braun has a terrible day and never has a good day ever again. Amen. And truly making him rue the day that he crossed her. She also raised a large amount of awareness for younger artists about intellectual property, exposing more about predatory label contracts, and inspiring artists to fight for ownership and control of their own work. The fact that she had all of these old albums that had already come out and already gone to #1, heading straight to #1 again, is honestly very impressive. No one is moving physical units like Taylor Swift. No one. Fearless, Taylor's version, was a great first pancake. The vaults were lacking, which I've already discussed, but I think we were all left wondering, okay, this was kind of a cute little moment, but how are we going to do this for all the re-records? How can we possibly, maintain this interest? Enter Red, her most ambitious re-recording to date, where she had the crown jewel of vault tracks, the fabled 10-minute version of All Too Well. This was truly just the perfect storm. Long before Taylor lost control of her masters, before we even made it into the 1989 era, Swifties were hounding Taylor for this once-mentioned 10-minute version of a song. Liz Rose had mentioned it in an interview, and Taylor had confirmed the existence of this longer expanded version of the song in a meet and greet. She always said that she didn't have it or she didn't know where it was, so it became this kind of clue or this in-the-know inside joke or discovery that we had run with for a really long time. So for the old, long-time fans, hearing that this was on the record made us really lose the plot. And whenever we lose the plot, because there are so many of us and we drive so much of discourse on social media, the regular old media picks up on it. So there's also the added layer of critical interest here, not just the fan and new fan fervor that surrounds it. Red is widely considered in the industry to be Taylor's best album, and All Too Well is her best song. And the expectations for the 10-minute version were high, and boy, it delivered. And she milked it for all it was worth. There was a music video or a short film. There were like a million versions of it. The SNL performance. It was a really incredible reconnection with her older self, and people responded very organically to it because it was a true value add. This was something unique and interesting. Every time she does a new re-recording, I think she onboards new diehard fans because it's fun. The casual Swiftie is no longer just listening to the singles. The casual Swiftie knows at least 80% of the words to a 10-minute song called All Too Well. And that's crazy. The power of her parasocial relationships are so different now to how they were before. It's not just about appealing to the core audience, it's about onboarding new people into the core audience. So then we go to the kind of current era, and I think that this is where everything converged, came together to create the perfect storm, becoming a main pop girl again. Our shy and retiring former pop girl who became an indie pop artist for a while decided with a bang in September of 2002 that she was ready for another main pop girl event. With the pandemic and its various restrictions firmly in the rear view, Taylor announced a brand new era called Midnights. The marketing for this new record was an interesting case study in how she would review her interactions with traditional media while trying to launch a pop album after the success of Folklore and Evermore. Lover had really been, her last pop album before Midnights, had been everywhere all at once with all of these magazine covers, these morning show interview appearances and performances. The Midnights promo was kind of a test for this new era of Taylor Swift's career. How can we do all of this marketing for a major pop culture moment in-house without relying on anyone outside of the Taylor Swift brand? Sure, she had collaborations and release distribution things with streaming platforms, but she wasn't relying on any organization outside of her own organization to promote this record and have it be successful. She had Midnight's Mayhem with Me, which was a little teaser series that she hosted on her own TikTok. She made one appearance at the VMAs just to announce the record. There was was no lead single, no teaser tracks, just 3 months of hype building, and to be honest, user-generated content. We did the promotion for her, getting the fans to do it all on her behalf, essentially, just by leaving a few little breadcrumbs. This was different from the way even that Folklore and Evermore were marketed, where she held interviews and did documentaries explaining her own process. To this day, she has not really explained how she came to create Midnights or how she feels about it at all. There was literally no explanation. It was just reputation. And the contents of this record were definitely, in hindsight, very calculated. She needed new pop material to tour, and her relationship was breaking down, but she wasn't ready to share that yet. So the result is a very kind of route by the numbers Taylor Swift album. There are no risks being taken here. There's nothing especially different about it. It's not artistically challenging in the way that Folklore and Evermore were. It's just a good old-fashioned Taylor Swift and Jack Antonoff pop record. But despite the fact that there wasn't really anything new or any growth or development on display here, it still was wildly successful. Songs like Antihero, I think specifically you can tell were written to go viral in a very certain way. She furthered the hype of this record by releasing the 3 a.m. edition with 6 bonus tracks, and then she gamified the charts by releasing continuous remixes of Antihero, securing a longer run at number 1 than probably the song would have had organically. And that is the power of Taylor Mania, being able to manufacture dominance without any external partners. And then, of course, Taylor Mania truly explodes and takes over the world with the Eras Tour. The Eras Tour is the aha moment of Taylor Swift's career and maybe the highlight of it all completely. I think that much of where Taylor's gotten to now has not been planned out. It's been accidental. So much of success in the entertainment industry is about luck and timing. And Taylor has great luck and a great product. This tour, as I mentioned earlier, is on track to be the highest grossing tour of all time. There was an unprecedented demand for tickets, leading to, hopefully, antitrust legislation against Ticketmaster and an absolutely insane resale market. Her merchandise operation has fans queuing overnight for a blue crew neck like it's liquid gold. This tour is completely inescapable on social media. It's radicalizing the casual fans and interesting people that weren't even interested in Taylor casually to begin with in the first place. The lore and the Easter egging, the friendship bracelets, the outfit culture, the parasocial relationship building is just reaching new heights, and it's impacting more than just the diehards. Emerging from the pandemic restrictions and touring for the first time with 4 albums of new material was always going to be a huge draw for whenever Taylor was going to go on tour. But I don't think that anyone, including her, anticipated the level of demand there was going to be. I mean, she initially added 52 shows and eventually ended up having to have 80 dates, which still were just not enough to accommodate all the demand. It's going international, worldwide. This is her most international tour of all time. And now we have the film coming out. And the film itself has been a very groundbreaking thing for the entertainment industry, the way that she, negotiated a direct distribution deal with movie theaters and was able to finance the film entirely by herself, completely cutting out the middleman, not having Hollywood studios involved in the distribution efforts of this. This all just goes on to show that Taylor Mania really is about having Taylor be like a one-woman operation. She is the marketing department. She is publicity. She is PR. She doesn't need any assistance. She doesn't need to rely on the goodwill of mainstream media or any sort of other external partner to make sure that she's a success. She probably doesn't even really need a record label at this point. So here is where I think Beatlemania comes in as a really good contrast and example with the Eras Tour. I got these categories of how to measure Beatlemania against Taylor Mania from Trung Fan's excellent newsletter Sat Post. His categories that he came up with for the 3 kind of reasons why Beatlemania and Taylor Mania have taken over the world are the concentration of demand, the national mood, and the boost from new technology. So what was the Beatles' concentration of demand? British fans embraced the Beatles in early 1963. By the end of that year, the band were widely recognized in the UK, but in contrast, the US was mostly unaware of the Beatles for most of that year. However, a series of fortunate events led to a surge in their popularity in the US, and their performance on The Ed Sullivan Show was particularly pivotal, marking their breakthrough in America. This was partially a result of Capitol Records' delay in promoting them, leading to the release of 4 hit singles in rapid succession, creating an overwhelming demand by the time they appeared on the show. Taylor's last major tour before the Eras Tour was in 2018, and fans were eagerly awaiting her return, especially after the 4 studio albums and 2 re-recorded albums in the intervening years. The release of Midnights was also particularly significant, dominating the Billboard Top 100 charts. When tickets for the Eras Tour went on sale, the demand was so high that Ticketmaster crashed. So essentially there was just a massive gap between her touring and her prolific musical output during this period of restriction and isolation created a huge pent-up demand. Then we need to talk a little bit about the national social mood. So the Beatles had emerged during a period of time where the assassination of JFK had a profound effect on the national psyche. It was a dark, scary, somber time. And during this period of collective mourning, the CBS anchor Walter Cronkite decided to air a segment on the Beatles as a much-needed distraction. And this broadcast really further propelled the band's popularity, with many seeing their music as a source of joy during a very dark time. And the Eras Tour kind of coincided with the dark time as well, when people were emerging from restrictions and the anxieties of COVID-19. The music industry was really hurting, especially the live music industry. Nobody was really sure if it was ever going to go back to the way that it was before, and production delays, supply and demand issues, it really just seemed like there was an economic downturn of 2022. But 2023 saw a huge resurgence in consumer sentiment. People were eager to attend in-person events at any cost. And Taylor's tour, as well as Beyonce's Renaissance tour, really became the go-to events. And the Eras Tour specifically was anticipated to boost local economies significantly wherever it went. And that's why you saw cities, renaming streets after Taylor, giving National Taylor Swift Days, giving her the keys to the city. It was all kind of a sign of the profound and wide-reaching impact that her artistry has beyond just, selling out a concert. Then we also have the boost from new technology. So the Beatles' rise in the US coincided with the boom of transistor radios. The sales of these radios nearly doubled from 1962 to 1963. And this meant that millions of teens were tuning in and listening to the Beatles frequently, further amplifying their popularity. And for Taylor, in the years leading up to the Eras Tour, her social media following, continued to grow exponentially, especially on platforms like Instagram and newly TikTok. Taylor's adept use of social media, she's always been very good at communicating on it, even with comments turned off, even with lower interactions. So combined with the proliferation of these platforms and the new users that came on during the pandemic and were looking for stuff to talk about, this really ensured that the music and her tour remained a trending topic that was at the forefront of our cultural conversations. She also very cleverly baked in social media elements into her show. So all of the costume changes, the different variations of the dresses and the outfits that she wears that come out every night, fuels people to talk about it online every single time that it's in a new city, and also changing her set list at each show. There was like a March Madness game going around for all of the secret songs and the surprise songs. People wanted to go to as many shows as possible just to see if they could maybe get their favorite song. This really kept fans actively engaged and discussing the concerts online. Not to mention that she announced Speak Now Taylor's version and 1989 Taylor's version while she was on this tour. She's been able to use her platform in so many different ways to extend it and its reach far beyond what any of us expected it could actually do. So to conclude, this era of Taylor Swift's popularity is something that we really just haven't seen, I think. This level of cultural dominance is something we've never seen from Taylor. I keep trying to think of how it relates to the 1989 era, and it almost doesn't, because the 1989 era relied so heavily on Taylor being everywhere. She was on every talk show. She was up and out of her house every single day getting papped. She was appearing in all of her friends' different media ventures. There was a lot of additional and peripheral moving parts to Taylor's 1989 success, and this Eras Tour Midnight's success is truly unprecedented in the fact that it's all coming from within the house itself. She doesn't really need to be relying on any outside partners to facilitate this level of fame. And I mean, the better question to ask is, where does it go from here? There is something interesting about the fact that it's much harder to, get acclaim and get respect and get fame than it is to keep it. So hanging on to this crown, I wonder how important that is to her. I'm starting to understand very much, because she's putting her personal life back out in public in a way that she hasn't done for a very long time. It seems that Taylor has this renewed and engaged interest in being the most famous person in the world. And whether or not that will end up being a good or a bad thing for her, overexposure is a real thing. But at this point, Taylor has been defying all of our expectations. Everybody said after 1989 she could never reach those, levels or heights again. Even though people thought the Reputation wasn't a big album, the subsequent tour was much bigger than the 1989 tour, and her career really just has gone from strength to strength, with the exception of a small sag with Lover. So it's hard to even kind of say that overexposure could have a negative impact on her, because I think she has a more intuitive understanding of when to play, when to engage, and when to go away. And right now, she knows that it's time to play and milk it for all it's worth. So I'm terribly excited for, what's to come over this next year, and I will always be here cataloging whatever is going on for you on Swiftologist. And if you like this video, make sure to subscribe for more thoughtful content coming at you very soon. 1989 month is going to be absolutely insane, and you just simply have to subscribe and stick around. Half of you that watch my videos are not subscribed, and I'm just wondering why at this point. I do the work, I put in the work, I put in the graft, and I think I should be rewarded for it. Coming up this week on Twitch, I'm going to be talking about Demi Lovato, doing a deep dive into her career, and watching another Taylor Swift concert movie. I'm not sure which one yet. I'm kind of feeling Reputation, though. I think that's where we're going to go. We did 1989 this week, and if you want to see the recording of that, again, it is on the Patreon. I will see you in my next video. Goodbye, Swifties.